Hey, what's up, everyone? Come on in. This is.
Tosh TV.
Let's get to it. America is falling. I have been warning you about this for at least 2 years now. I've seen the writing on the fucking wall. China's up next. The BRICS nations will lead the world in this fourth industrial revolution, Society 5.0. It's no secret. But let's hear Ray Diallo. I believe that's how you say his name. Let's hear him and what he has to say about kind of what I'm talking about.
Are we, in your judgment, the order is
changing the world? Okay. In 1945, we started the news. Throughout history, there's a fight for control because there's no world court that you go to and plead your case. And so there's a fight for power. So there's a war, and then the winners come out of that war, and the winners set the rules. And so 1945, the United States had 80% of the world's money. Gold was money at the time. It had half the world's GDP. It had a monopoly on military power. So the U.S. set the world order. That's why the United Nations is in New York. Washington, D.C. has the IMF and the World Bank.
and its currency became the reserve currency.
And its currency became the reserve currency because of that set of circumstances. Okay, things evolve, things change, okay, over history. So the three big things that are changing now that haven't occurred in our lifetime is the amount of debt and money creation, which affects the value of money, and you could see it affecting what's going on.
Which we just printed like a third of the world's money in the last like 5 years.
Every day.
Large debt means the printing of money.
Right. The large debt puts central bankers in a choice.
America, I believe, is like $32 trillion in debt.
Do you pay it back with hard money or do you pay it back with printed devalued money? And if you pay it back with hard money, it's hard. In other words, when you have debt crises. So in all cases, they eventually print money and that produces inflation, right? So that dynamics, the first.
And that's the place we are at this moment.
That's the place we are at this moment.
Okay.
And we'll talk about that.
We'll drill down on that
in a minute. The second is when there's a great internal conflict, usually when there's a large wealth and values gap. And at the same time.
And what he's saying is when there's a wealth gap, as in the middle class is no more. You have rich, you have poor. That's it. That's also where we're at right now. Many of us believe that the middle class is still there. It's not. It's been gone for a while. The illusion is we have the middle class. You see, they build cheap houses for us to buy very expensively, in which we buy those houses. They give us cheap crap cars that are too expensive. We buy those cars, and we feel the illusion of middle class. There is no such thing anymore.
As you have a financial problem. Then you get populism of the left and populism of the right. In other words, people are going to fight for them. They don't want compromisers. They don't want them to be in the middle because middle means that they're not fighting for them. They want them to have guts. So that you have.
And you have that now. You have super liberalism, super conservatism. I was going to say MAGA. But you have that now, the overbearing extremist ideologies of both the right and left because of what's happening in America.
Populists of the left and populists
and their positions harden.
And their positions harden, and there are no compromises. That's why we're potentially in a situation that you could see in one of these elections, maybe in 2024, that neither side would accept losing. Perhaps we see that. You see, maybe you don't follow the rulings of the Supreme Court. Anyway,
that's a serious question today.
So these things have not happened in our lifetime, but they happened many times in history.
They're happening right now, Ray.
So if you look at that, you see from those patterns why the gaps become greater and the positions harden, and you see the dynamic. So that's the second. And the third is the rise of a great power to challenge the existing great power. In other words, I gave you the example of how the United States was so dominant in 1940.
And that rise of that superpower, like I've went over multiple times on my show, is China and the BRICS nations. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They just got the Saudis on board, Venezuela on board, Iran on board. Shit, they are the brokers of peace now. China leading all of them. So listen to what he says lastly.
45. Now it's not as dominant. It is not dominant. In other words, China and the opposition is as strong as the United States and its allies. And so we have a conflict. And there are 5 kinds of wars. And they start in this order, just sequentially, typically. A trade war.
Trade war, which we had when Trump was in office, all those tariffs and shit he was putting on China and Russia.
Technology war.
Technology war, in which we are doing right now when it comes to crypto, artificial intelligence, robotics, all that good stuff.
A geopolitical influence war.
Geopolitical influence war we're having right now. You got Americans right now sympathizing, empathizing with President Putin over there in Russia. A lot of Americans see no problem with Putin anymore, or Xi Jinping, or whatever his name is in China.
Then you get into a capital and economic warfare, which we are now with sanctions.
That kind of goes with the first one, but yes, we are there right now. The BRICS nations are developing their own SDR. They will have a world reserve currency. Yes, America's dollar will still be relevant, but it won't be dominant. The BRICS nations are coming.
They always happened in history, and then there's a military war.
And the military war we're gearing up to. If you didn't know, Google China alerting its military of the possible war with America by 2025. Thank you, Ray, for that. That was very insightful. With all that being said, you are seeing the destruction happen within America. The parasites are killing America, and these parasites are your government. Your right, left, in between, it doesn't fucking matter. Your government in America is killing America. Let's take a listen real quick to some expert opinions on the stock market.
Chairman Jay Powell back on Capitol Hill today for day 2 of his testimony. He will be in front of the House Financial Services Committee this morning. Stocks tumbled yesterday after his...
And we will see a little bit of what Jerome Powell said in that hearing with the Senate. It should scare the socks off of you.
Comments that rates may have to go higher to rein in inflation. Watch this.
The latest economic data have come in stronger than expected. If the totality of the data were to indicate that faster tightening is warranted, we'd be prepared to increase the pace of rate hikes.
Joining me, Bear Traps report found a New York Times best-selling author, Larry McDonald. Larry, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for being here. I want to get your take on Jay Powell yesterday. What did you make of the speech?
Well, it's kind of like he's over in 2021. Inflation started to rage, and now they're trying to catch up. Our 21 Lehman's hysteria point to one of the highest probabilities of a crash 60 days.
Wow, 60 days.
Yes, because the withdrawal of capital from the middle class families is so spectacular.
Within the coming days, this expert says that America will see a stock market crash. Days. Taj TV and many like Taj TV have been warning you for years. Did you listen? Did you get yourselves ready? Do you have money in the bank? Probably should take that out. But if the expert opinions are a crash within the coming days, what about our treasurer, Janet Yellen? What does she think? Let's take a look.
Since 1789, the United States has always bills on time and continue to do so. In my assessment and those of economists across the board, the default on our debt would trigger an economic and financial catastrophe. I urge all members of Congress to come together to address the debt limit without conditions and without waiting until the last minute.
Well, Janet Yellen, I'm sorry, but that's not going to happen. You see, these parasites, including yourself, you need to crash America. You need to make America poor, extremely poor, beyond American standards, and you need China and Russia to rise. You need a balanced world for globalism. They've already set the rules. America will not reign supreme within this globalistic society. But I'm sure many of you knew that. I'm sure many of you knew, especially if you watch Touch TV, that this was happening right underneath our noses. They give you stories of Ja Morant. They give you the clown monkey show of entertainment in America to distract you from what's really going on. And what's really going on is a systematic collapse, controlled demolition of the American economy, of America's prosperity of sorts. We will feel it in 2023. The Fed rate hikes that started last year in 2022 generally take about 12 months, maybe a year and a half to really take effect. But I think Jerome Powell is going to do more rate hikes. We're about to feel it for the next couple years. America's about to get to a Great Depression. We are already in a recession. I've already made a show about it probably a year ago. And no one believes me. Great Depression is next. And we were warned about this by President Trump, and many of you, just because you hate his tweets, didn't listen to him. See, that's the man that you should have listened to. He's the outsider. He has no allegiance to these parasites, to these leeches in Washington. He was trying to warn you. I mean, he wasn't going to stop shit. He can't. But he was trying to warn you on the dangerous activity that the Congress, the Senate, and other presidents before him were engaged in. But let's listen to the federal chair. This is another part of the hearing he was at about 4 or 5 days ago. Let's listen to what he says about on unemployment in the coming months, if not days.
So the Fed has raised interest rates 8 times over the last year in what has been the most extreme rate hike cycle in 40 years. The Fed's goal is to slow inflation, and your tool, raising interest rates, is designed to slow the economy and throw people out of work. So far, you haven't tipped the economy into recession, but you haven't brought inflation entirely under control either. And maybe the reason for that is that other things are also keeping prices high, things you can't fix with high interest rates, things like price gouging and supply chain kinks and a war in Ukraine. But you are determined to continue to raise interest rates, so I want to take a look at where you're headed. In December, the Fed released its projections on the state of the economy under your monetary policy plan.
I'm sorry, I have to stop this and say that Pocahontas has been in office for almost, a decade, and she's acting as if she has no part in the collapse of the economy in America. Shame on her, and shame on all of them in this room who act like they have no fucking idea when they've been in these positions of power for decades. Shame on all of you. You're not going to fool me, and you're not going to fool people like me. We know. Horrible, horrible fucking people. Leeches, parasites. Anyway, Pocahontas, continue. Hold on.
According to the Fed's own reporting rates as you plan. Unemployment be if you hit projections, do you know how many people who are currently working, going about their lives, will lose their jobs?
I don't have that number in front of me. I will say it's not an
just a math
intended
problem.
consequence. It's
Well,
not.
but it is, and it's in your report, and that would be about 2 million people who would lose.
The kettle calling the pot black. Is that how you say it? Oh, but it is an intended consequence. Yes, Elizabeth, you are a part of that. Shame on you.
Lose their jobs. People who are working right now, making their mortgages. So, Chair Powell, if you could speak directly to the 2 million hardworking people who have decent jobs today, who you're planning to get fired over the next year, what would you say to them? How would you explain your view that they need to lose their jobs?
I would explain to people more broadly that inflation is extremely high and it's hurting the working people of this country badly. All of them, not just 2 million of them, but all of them are suffering under high inflation, and we are taking the only measures we have to bring in.
Listen to words. The only measures he has. What happened to the other measures? What happened to the economy was going to be transitory when the change of power happened? Oh, this is transitional. This is transitional. Remember the bullshit they fed you, America. Remember the bullshit they fed you.
Inflation down.
And putting 2 million people out of work is just part of the cost, and they just have to bear it.
Will working people be better off if we just walk away from our jobs and inflation remains 5-6%?
Let me ask you about what happens if you do this. Since the end of World War II, there have been 12 times in which the unemployment rate has increased by 1 percentage point within 1 year, exactly what you're aiming to do right now. How many of those times did the U.S. economy avoid falling into a recession?
You know, it's not as black and white as it very. Alan Blinder's written a book on this, and
there have been 12 times that we've seen a 1 point increase in the unemployment rate in a year. That's exactly what your Fed report has put out as the projection and the plan based on how you're going to keep raising these interest rates. How many times did the economy fail to fall into a recession after doing that? Out of 12 times.
I think the number is 0.
I think the number is 0.
We're already in a recession. See, this is how they trick you. They're telling you, oh, we're going into we're already there. We're already in a recession. No, we're going into a fucking Great Depression. That's where we're going. They continuously raise interest rates. The job growth continuously is plus 300,000. There's no balance. They are going to crash this fucking economy.
That's exactly right. So then the question becomes, we've got 2 million people out of work. Can you stop it at 2 million people? History suggests that the Fed has a terrible track record of containing modest increases in the unemployment rate. Once the economy starts shedding jobs, it's kind of a train. It is hard to.
They're telling you in so many ways, so many words, what's about to happen. Don't let these hooligans fool you.
In fact, in 11 out of the 12 times that the unemployment rate increased by a full percentage point within 1 year, unemployment went on to rise another full percentage point on top of that. If that's what happens this time, we'd be looking at least 3.5 million people who would lose their jobs. So, Chair Powell, if you reach your goal and 2 million people get laid off by the end of this year, and then, just like in 11 out of 12 times that unemployment has risen by a point in a single year, it keeps on rising, And then we've got 2.5 million people out of work. We've got 3 million people who get laid off. We've got 3.5 million people who get laid off. What's your plan?
Well, right now the unemployment rate is 3.4%, which is the lowest in 54 years. And we actually don't think that we need to see a sharp or enormous increase in unemployment to get inflation under control.
I'm looking at your projections. Do you call laying off 2 million people this year not a sharp increase in unemployment?
I would say 4.5%.
Explain that to the 2 million families who are going to be out of work.
We're not targeting any of that. But I would say even 4.5% unemployment is well better than most of the time for the last 75 years.
In other words, you don't have a plan to stop a runaway train if it occurs. Chair Powell, you are gambling with people's lives, and there's a
No, Elizabeth Warren, you all have gambled with our futures. America's future is over as the top dog. Ceases to amaze me how much we allow them to get away with. And when I say them, elites, the politicians, the big banks. Oh, by the way, here's a big bank for you. SVB Financial. Proud to be on Forbes' annual ranking of America's best banks for the 5th straight year, and to have been named to the publication's inaugural Financial All-Stars list. Look at these guys. They're on Forbes. The media props up a fucking failing bank. You don't believe me? Here's a clip of the media propping up a failing bank.
For financial, don't you want? This company's a merchant bank with a deposit base that Wall Street. It's become less dependent upon private equity. Wait a second. Those dried up last year, they could come back. Yeah, some of the directly affects an oversold position. Stock was the 4th worst performer in 2022. Years justified, and it's a very compelling situation. Private equity and venture capital, they're not going away. Being the banker to these immense pools of capital has always been a very good business. Stock's still cheap. Now, you have to remember that a stock that falls 66%, like SVB Financial did last year, it takes it a lot more to recover. After
the bank had already fallen in the stock market 60+%. And here is Jim Cramer telling you to buy this fucking stock, telling you to waste your fucking money on this stock, promoting that you stay poor while they stay rich. Do you think that Jim Cramer had this stock when he was telling you to buy it? Literally, days after this, the fucking collapse of this bank happens. There is no such thing as coincidences. Stop believing in the shenanigans. It's shenanigans. Silicon Valley Bank in the highlighted section is the 2nd largest bank failure in American history. The collapse has started.
Alarm outside headquarters of Silicon Valley Bank in Santa Clara, California today.
They just came out and told us that the bank is shut down.
SVB, the largest bank in the U.S., $175 billion in deposits, is now the biggest American bail since the 2008 financial crisis. Its customers, primarily businesses and investors in the tech sector.
The root cause of the failure here was a sudden and significant increase in interest rates.
Wow, didn't I just show you a fucking video on where Jerome Powell told you he's raising the interest rates? Didn't I just show you a video how Pocahontas asked him, was this going to cause mass fucking layoffs and unemployment? You're looking at America, you're looking at about 11 fucking million people losing their jobs. 11, 15 million people out of work within the coming days. After the news breaks out that SVB fucking bank fails, Janet Yellen has something to say about it. The treasurer. Let's listen.
Well, let me be clear that during the financial crisis, there were investors of systemic large banks that were bailed out, and we're certainly not looking, and the reforms that have been put in place.
See how the way she's talking? She's not, she has a script in front of her. She's not going to tell you what's real, but she did tell you something that was very real. They're not going to bail out this bank. What they're going to do is have this a bank run, and there's going to be merges of banks happening, merges of companies happening. They're going to have to just to survive because the economic collapse around the world is just so great. This is how they start. They start with the banks. The banks control the money. Then you start with the fucking retailers, the grocery stores, all that good shit out there, the jobs. The mergers of companies will happen to save this world, and they'll run on a blockchain. I've already explained it to you. Let's listen to the economists warn about the U.S. economy. You guys think this shit is a joke? I've been warning you. Go back to my video. The collapse was here. Economist warns the U.S. economy will be hit by a perfect storm this year. I'm going to fast forward it a little bit just so you can see those Fed rate hikes that Jerome Powell was talking about. So you can see exactly the shenanigans of what's happening.
In the last 2-3 years, a couple were worried about lowflation and deflation. Now we're worrying about inflation. A couple of years ago, we were worried there was too much savings, not enough demand, secular stagnation. Now we have to worry about stagflation, recession, and inflation. A couple of years ago, we were worried that interest rates were too low, and now they are rising because of inflation, and with large stocks of private and public debt, eventually debt ratios may become unsustainable. We were worried about hyper-globalization. Now we have to worry about deglobalization.
Those were banks on that screen there, too. Those were fucking banks. Red, 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 red. Collapse is here.
Balkanization of global supply chains, fragmentation, protectionism. And a couple of years ago, you had the everything bubble. We're worried about an asset and a credit bubble and a boom in the prices. Now there has been the beginning of a bust and a crash. Because there are these long and variable lags, it takes about 12 to 18 months.
This is the dates of the Fed rate hike so far. Remember when I told you that we just started last year? Last March. March 22nd. March 20 or May 22nd. June 20 2022. March 2022, May 2022, June 2022, July 2022, September 2022, November, December, February of 23. They went up 25, 50, 75, 75, 75, 75, 50, 25 points. And they're still going to raise them. This is no coincidence. This is a controlled demolition of the U.S. economy. This is what it is. And it's all for the rise of the BRICS nations. Let's have a listen.
And to discuss this, I'm joined by Iran analyst and CEO of Carpo Think Adnan Tabatabai, policy expert P. Joseph at the Johns Hopkins University. Adnan, let me begin with you. What is your initial reaction to this huge development and the fact that China has made this possible, something that the U.S. has not been able to do for the longest time?
Well, China dimension here is a big surprise, I have to admit. So what is not a surprise is that Iran and Saudi Arabia are finding a pathway towards resuming diplomatic ties and taking a further step towards rapprochement.
I don't need to show you anymore. Saudi Arabia, Iran, now on common ground. Something that President Trump was doing that you didn't give him credit for, that you went along with impeachment hoaxes for. Something that Joe Biden could not do, never do. Because why? He is in the pocket of China and Russia. The fucking pocket of him, of those countries. This is why Joe Biden has to fucking collapse this economy. And people like him that once were president and that are current senators and current congressmen, women, they're the pockets of the BRICS nations. This will be done. There's no choice, America. There's no choice. But I want you to listen to a wise man say, out of office. Warn the world about America meeting its fate, just like 1929. Let's take a listen.
Incredible job that we've done will go down like that. It will be a terrible, terrible sight. It might even be a 1929 situation, so you have a chance to have the greatest numbers in history. You're almost there. We're almost back to where we were from the standpoint of the stock market. Think of that. But you'll have a crash like you've never seen before. You put the wrong person in office, you'll see things that you would not have believed are possible.
And that's because Donald Trump knew that Joe Biden was in the pocket of the opposition, China, Russia, and the BRICS nations. And with all that being said, I thank you for tuning in to Taj TV. I hope you liked the episode. I will catch you when I catch you. Have a great night. See you later. Goodbye.